Hey, John Pond here, pastor at Jackson Way Baptist Church here in Huntsville, Alabama. And we have today with us Jay Ridenour, pastor of First Baptist Church Sudbury, and right outside Boston, Massachusetts. Jay, thank you for being with us today.
Glad to be here, Ponzi.
All right. So 2 years ago, I had the privilege of you inviting me to preach at your church on Sunday morning, and you actually pulled me aside probably 30 minutes before the sermon, and you said, do not, just preach the word. Don't get up there for the first 5-10 minutes and say great stuff about me. So I've been bitter ever since. Now I get to have my So at least for this morning, we're talking about discipling. And I thought, what better person to do that than the person who discipled me and who knows a lot about that subject. Obviously, God puts different men in our lives. Christians, God puts Christians in their lives for that, for mentoring and discipleship, and to show us who God is. And certainly God has given you in my life for that. But before we get started, what is the difference between discipleship and discipling? When we hear the word discipling, obviously most of us would just think that that's the same thing as discipleship. What is discipleship? What is discipling? Is there a difference?
Sure. I don't know if there's a biblical difference. I think when people in the church hear the term discipleship, they are probably thinking in terms of a programmatic system, like something that's supposed to take place, probably something that the church is supposed to do for them, that they are to attend, and they're more of a maybe a passive consumer, maybe something in that nature. When I hear the word discipling or making disciples, then that is something that would be more in terms of an active relationship between two people where there's clearly a mentoring going on, but there's still an iron sharpen ironing effect taking place between the two believers as one leads the others. It's distinctly active. It's distinctly investing.
So it seems like every 5 to 10 years, there's kind of a new buzzword in Christianity, in evangelical circles, whether it's new books have come out, conferences, things like that. Some of those buzzwords are biblical. Some of them are not. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. But it seems like discipleship has been a new buzzword that's come around again. Where do we find biblical verses that talk about discipling?
Well, it's the Great Commission, right? I think the church has taken the Great Commission and not wrongly, but it's and sort of seen it as a process for conversion alone, just saving sinners and going on the next person to save. Whereas making a disciple definitely begins with conversion. Right? Someone who's not saved becomes saved. They're not a disciple of Christ at some point, and then at some point they are a disciple of Christ. And then once that takes place, then there's this continual process of growing and maturation with them that we are to continually provide for younger believers in different ways, different forms, different seasons of life. But it's not simply, well, once we have them saved, now they're set, let me go on to the next thing. It's more of this relationship that's taking place over a longer period of time. I think you see it in the context of in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I think you see Moses and Joshua just follows Moses around until it's time for Joshua to lead the people. And there's a disciple making thing going on there, because Joshua is learning from Moses, not only by Moses teaching him things as he's teaching the Israelites, but he's also just watching Moses live his life. Jesus has all kinds of followers, but he has 12 distinct followers that he calls out. And he has 3 distinct followers within those 3, Peter, James, and John. And even amongst those 3, he has the beloved. He has John, who is why he gets the moniker of beloved and the others don't. We don't know, but we just know that he's close. We know that he's tight. We know on the cross he's sitting there and saying, here's my mom, and this is now your son, and this is now your mother. And there's an intimacy there that isn't applied to the other disciples for whatever reason. And again, in Paul and Timothy, there's zero question that there's just this really intimate relationship between the two of them, to the point where Paul's very familiar with his mom and his grandmom, and he's, the gifts have gone to them. Now it's going to go into Timothy, and he gives Timothy instruction and literally calls him a son, in so different occasions in the pastoral epistles. So, there is if I'm talking about discipling with someone, it doesn't exclude teaching. It doesn't exclude a transfer of information. But real discipleship has to be more than that from my perspective in the scriptures.
So for the average church member in our churches today, there's a lot of things they feel and they believe that they're supposed to do in the process of becoming more or looking more like Jesus Christ. Why is discipleship or discipling, why should that be towards the top?
Very simply, it's just the Great Commission. It's what we're called to do. And if you're not making disciples, then we're not actually doing the thing we're commanded to do. And if the Lord commands it, then it's also the thing that brings us the most joy, right? Whatever the Lord asks us to do, he's doing it for his glory and our benefit. So there's a great, it's not always easy. It doesn't lack in failure or pain. But where that relationship builds well, there's a great joy and a great blessing in it that you can't really find anywhere else. So if we are Christian and we are attending church and we are doing things, but we're not actually discipling someone, and then we're missing out on a key piece of joy that the Lord has offered to us through his commandment.
So how has this affected you personally, growing up, even as a pastor now, but also before, just in your younger years? How has this personally impacted you?
How long do we have? It's in my growing up years. I look back on a great tradition in history of people who have viewed this the same way, who have been convicted about this in the same way, and they have poured into my life. The list goes on and on. Ron Sylvia, Rip Radcliffe, Jeff Finkelstein. These are pastors and Sunday school teachers, laymen, friends in college have done the same thing. Campus ministers done the same thing. And then it just transfers, right? Somewhere I become old enough where I start to disciple. Somewhere I was discipled in junior high, but when I got to high school, I could disciple a junior high. When I got to college, I could disciple high schoolers and junior hires. And when I got to, when I got out of college, I could disciple college students. And I just kept, just keeps going down. And so now, I'm just, it's just what I do. Now I'm old, right? Now I'm and I can disciple, people who are willing to be discipled in that sense. But I'm always just seeking out the opportunities to invest in someone, to teach the word, to hold accountable, to share life experience, so that people know that Christ is real and they're not alone, and the scriptures will speak into their lives by the power of the Spirit to transform them from glory to glory, as First Corinthians talks about, right? We're growing in this way daily. So, it's the thing I like to preach. I really enjoy it, but it's a tough one for me, but I'd probably disciple. If I had to choose, I'd be like, if I could have 2 or 3 one-on-one relationships that run deep and produce fruit, I'd probably do that over just the Sunday morning pulpit, I think.
So you have people in your church you're discipling, I assume. Do you have people outside of the Boston area that you are still discipling?
Sure. And again, not in an overly formal way. I check in on you. I check in on some other guys that are pastors. You're a part of a group of pastors that meet to catch up with each other and to help sharpen our sermons and such, and push each other along a little bit. That's a form of discipleship. I don't spend time in the Word regularly with somebody outside my church. I don't think that I can it's because of my head, but there's other guys that are in my church that I spend time with. The more physical distance, the harder it becomes, because you're not really in that person's life. When I see you week to week in my church, when I see you, another time during the week, because we're meeting together and stuff like that, like I can watch your life and you can watch my life. And now you know something that's distinct than a once a month phone call or video call. There's a lot of our hearts are prone to wander, and our hearts are prone to hide, and we don't like to share all of our dirt all the time. And there's a lot of hiding you can do in a once a month meeting. There's a lot of perception you can put up through a video call or a phone call from a distance that's 1 or 2 hours away. That's much harder to do in the context of the local church.
So you're a pastor now. How old are you now?
I am 46.
46 years old. So you are discipling younger guys, but are there still men in your life that you would say in some form or another are discipling you, or is that something that stops when you get to a certain age as a mature Christian?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't have a individual that meets with me on a weekly basis to study the scriptures, if that's what we're talking about. I do have guys in my life that are my age or are older, and sometimes maybe a little bit younger, because it's not just about your age; it's about you're walking with the Lord. But guys who definitely sharpen me. Fortunately, as a pastor, I have elders. And those guys sharpen me just by our weekly meetings, and we shepherd each other's souls, right? We're discipling each other in that sense. I do have my old youth pastor from when I was in high school, Dwight Moody. I'd probably talk to him, I don't know, 4 or 6 times a year, and that's just good time. It's not always instructive, but it is, how are you doing and what's going on? There's a place that I can be vulnerable there and share stuff that's going on that's really helpful. Yeah, I've got there's other pastors, other guys and such like that. I think that come about here or there. You sharpen me when we talk. Yeah.
So in these discipling relationships, what would you say are some key ingredients other than, so how do we know, maybe a better way to ask this question is, how do we know that discipling is taking place? Obviously, relationship is great when we get together over a cup of coffee or ribs or whatever. But how do we actually know that discipling is taking place?
I would give you 3 components. I don't think discipleship is taking place unless the word's involved. Whether that's we're studying a verse by verse text, or we're going through it with what the Lord's been teaching us in our quiet times, and it's not just it's not just sentiment about how great Jesus is, but it's like, no, here's the word and here's how it's shaping my life. Here's how I've been convicted by the word, those sorts of things. The word has to be being shared in a discipleship relationship. I think prayer is a second component. It's be difficult for me to say I'm really discipling somebody if I'm not praying over that person, receiving prayer from that person. Sharing, that's a way. The prayer is the response to what's going on in our hearts, right? We're sharing what's taking place in our lives, and we're praying over those things: our marriages, our kids, our jobs, our people we're witnessing to, fears, anxieties, things from the past that we're trying to work through, present day circumstances that are difficult. You're sharing that stuff and praying over those things. And then the third thing would be a confession of sin. James tells us to do that, confess our sins, right? One to another. And so if you're not really, the point of discipleship is to grow closer to Jesus. And you're not really going to grow closer to Jesus unless you're in some way, shape, or form confessing your sin to each other and letting that person speak into your life about that sin, and help guard your soul in that sense.
Amen. So if I'm a normal average church member, I'm sitting under the preaching of the word every Sunday morning. I'm in a Sunday school class or a small group during the week or on Sunday morning, but I want to go deeper. I want to be involved in discipling this kind of deeper relationship where confessions of sin and those kinds of things are taking place, like you said, what would be the starting point of trying to build that culture in a church or just personally in my own life?
So building that culture in a church is a different issue. It's a whole different question. I think to the first point, like if you're just the average guy, like what do I do? How do I start this? I think there's two ways that you do it. Actually, there's three things. The first is that you have to have an authentic desire to want to do this. You have to let the Lord convict you. This is an important part of your life, and to organize your life around it. You're going to have to sacrifice some time to make it happen. But then, so unless you're willing to do that, then you'll probably just be content with just receiving from Sunday school classes or sermons or whatever the case may be. You have to receive. You need to have that, but you need to see it as the call. So that's probably the first and most important thing. Then when it actually comes to the relationship of things, it seems to me pragmatically, there's just sort of one of two ways to do it. Either you have a friend who you enjoy being around, where the depth of that relationship that comes from scriptures and confession and prayer doesn't exist, and you approach that friend and say, hey, I really want this. What do you think? Like, can we get together on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis and spend an hour and a half together talking the scriptures, sharing our lives, and praying for each other? Would you like to do that? And some people will just tell you no, they don't they don't want to. But you would do that enough times till you found the person who said yes. And then you lock it in, like you set that time and you make it a priority. And then you just pick a book of the Bible, and you can always find a Bible study. You can always find something to help you get through that if you're not good at studying the scriptures. It's a great little book called 1-to-1 Bible Reading that's super helpful by David Helm. That will just, you can read it in about an hour, and it will just sort of give you it'll give you a way to read scriptures together. And then it really sort of takes I think a lot of people don't do this because they are scared they're going to do it wrong. And we need to get over being scared. And we need to trust that if we have a willing heart to sharpen each other one-on-one, to be vulnerable with each other, to confess into each other, and if we're willing to do that, that's what the Lord desires. And he's to be faithful by the Spirit to help you walk through the scriptures and help you come to good conclusions and help lead each other in this way, not perfectly, but enough grace to do that. The other way to do it is just to find somebody who you have a relationship with who's just younger than you, maybe who's not thinking about it at all. Like if maybe they're not a mutual friend just yet, maybe they're just an acquaintance, or they're just somebody younger, for certain they're younger in the faith than you. Not that they're immature, or not that they're silly or stupid or anything like that, or not that you're so much better than them. But you've been a Christian for the last 10 years of your life, and you've been growing and studying and maturing, and this person's been a Christian for the last 2 years of their life, and they too have a desire to follow the Lord. They just don't have as much time and experience in the Word as you do. So you just say, hey, and you just approach that person. We sometimes, I think, have a false humility, kind of like, well, if somebody asks me to do that for them, I'm willing, but I'm not going to go tell somebody, hey, I can disciple you. Well, I'm glad that our congregations feel that way. They shouldn't be like, oh, I'm the chief discipler. But at the same time, there is definitely a place for a humble question, right? To say and just to be aware that, yeah, I'm farther along. It's not a pride issue. It's just a reality issue, and I can help this brother or sister, grow in the Lord at least for a season. Yeah.
So leaders in the church, kind of second part of this question, leaders in the church want to see this kind of as a culture in the church, kind of a sweeping passion that goes through the church, real relationships around the scriptures. How does that start? What's a good starting point for that?
Yeah, I think in part to do it yourself, just finding a couple guys, couple 3 or 4 guys, or if you're female, not to find a couple 3 ladies that you have time to spend time with, or even if it's just you only have time for one person, then just start doing that. But and set the expectation on the front end. Hey, I want to meet with you. I want to spend time with you, but I'm doing it because I want you to be able to do it with others and have a desire to do it with others. As pastors who are or elders or leaders in a church, then you sort of I don't know how else to say it other than the Bible. The Bible's asked the church to give us double honor, right? The Bible literally tells the church to do that, which I find absolutely crazy at some level. But thankful, but like, you're just going to carry a weight, right? If you're the person who's preaching and teaching every week, then you're going to carry a certain weight and a certain, I don't know, a certain leadership quality. People will be willing to listen to you. So you grab 2 or 3 guys and say, I want to do this for the next 8 weeks. I want to do this for the next 6 months. I want to do this for the next year. And then when we walk through this thing, then I want you to do this same thing with someone else. Our meetings, we'll still be good friends. We'll still be in accountable relationships together. We'll just meet less frequently, so you have more time to go do what's been done to you.
So I've just been able to witness over the past few years just a very popular thing of in these discipling relationships to just take a book and go through it, and whether meaning to or not, but just not having the presence of the scriptures. It's mainly just, let's go through this book. Is there a danger to that?
Danger. Sure. I mean, if the danger would always be that knowledge puffs up and love builds up. Now, clearly, Colossians would Paul prays for the church at Colossae, that they would grow in the knowledge of God, like not just like a literal, like an understanding, a learning. So I mean, that's important, and Christian books are certainly helpful. But if my only steady diet is just other authors, without ever discussing the scriptures, without ever saying, hey, how, what are you reading in the Bible? What is God's word teaching? What's the Holy Spirit teaching you through God's very word? Then there is that. I mean, I guess that would be a danger. That'd be a caution, I guess, that that I'm just taking in truths, good truths that good men and women have written and taught us, but it's never stands on par with the truth of God from His Word.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for discipling me, and I know many others. And so, just thank you for your time as we've talked about discipling, and just appreciate all you do.
Thanks, brother. It's my privilege, man. My privilege.